Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking a deep breath and a very deep dive into the digital transformation of identity. This is one of those topics, where the stated goal convenience collides just head on with these powerful global fears about control. Specifically, we're focusing on the arguments and source material around the rollout of new e-passports. We're looking at the Indian initiative in particular, and what our research claims is the real long-term agenda behind them. Officially, the claims they're pretty simple. Overwhelmingly positive. E-passports are being sold as this highly secure, convenient upgrade designed to streamline borders, cut down wait times, and most importantly, curb fraud using biometrics. On the surface, that sounds like pretty necessary progress.
Right. But the sources we've collected, they reveal this really significant and highly charged core tension just beneath all those official statements. So our mission today is to analyze the material that suggests this movement isn't isolated at all. It is instead linked directly to concerns around what these materials call Agenda 2030 and the establishment of a potential global system of digital control.
Yeah, we're looking at claims that position the e-passport not as just a travel document, but as a foundational pillar, a mandatory digital ID, really, in a much larger global tracking system.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's get right into the mechanics of why these sources are so suspicious. So let's start with the immediate technical shift. We're going from a paper booklet to one with a biometric chip inside. The official line is all about security. But the moment you bring in biometrics, we're talking fingerprints, iris scans, the question immediately becomes, why? Why do you need these deeply personal biological markers if the only goal is to, verify you are who you say you are at a border? And that's the exact jumping off point for the skeptical counter-argument in our source material. It describes the e-passport not as a simple upgrade, but as the Trojan horse of convenience.
A Trojan horse.
Exactly. It's a system people accept because it makes travel faster, but it's carrying this hidden payload of data collection inside.
So what exactly does the source material claim this chip is designed to collect, beyond just a photo?
The material claims the chips are built to log your fingerprints, an exhaustive and permanent travel history. And crucially, they are designed from the ground up to be linked to other foundational identity data.
And the big example here is Aadhaar.
The most prominent example the source material focuses on, yes, is linking to the massive Indian biometric ID system, Aadhaar.
That's a critical point, especially for anyone listening outside of India. We hear the name Aadhaar a lot in this context. Can you just briefly explain what it is and why linking it to a passport makes the privacy concerns so much bigger?
Absolutely. Aadhaar is. It's essentially the world's largest biometric identity database. It stores fingerprints and iris scans for nearly every resident of India. So when the e-passport gets linked to Aadhaar, the passport stops being just a travel credential. It becomes the key that links your international movements to your entire domestic identity file.
So banking, subsidies, even your phone's SIM card details?
All of it, potentially. The concern is really about merging these giant data sets. A normal passport, it has limited use for domestic surveillance. But a passport that's linked to a universal biometric ID like Aadhaar, it suddenly becomes this unified high-value data point that tracks your entire existence, globally and locally.
And this is where the source material makes a really dramatic leap. It explicitly asks if this merging of data, passport, travel, domestic ID is similar to China's social credit system. And then it argues it could be worse. I mean, that is an astonishing claim. What element does the source point to that makes this system theoretically worse than a known national surveillance state?
The source material focuses not on the severity of the punishment, but on the completeness of the data merger, the centralization.
Okay.
In a system like China's, you have separate systems for social scoring, for banking, for travel, even if they talk to each other. The source argues that this global push for interoperability means the e-passport is designed to be the single centralized key that unlocks everything. So the danger they emphasize isn't just surveillance knowing where you've been, it's the concept of a total data merger. When travel data, bank data, health data, maybe even vaccination status, can all be accessed or controlled by one chip. Well, the system gains a level of integrated control over you that's just unprecedented. If it fades or if it's revoked,
you're locked out of everything at once.
Theoretically, yes, locked out of all aspects of modern life simultaneously.
That focus on centralization brings us right back to the global push. If the e-passport is just one piece of the puzzle, we need to zoom out. Let's look at the claims the source material makes about the big international organizations driving these mandates. The sources point to a specific timeline. They highlight a claimed mandate from the International Civil Aviation Organization, the ICAO, targeting 2025 for a standardized global digital ID structure. That suggests this isn't just a country-by-country thing. It's a coordinated, powerful push to digitize identity in just the next couple of years.
And based on that alleged timeline and the design of the chip itself, the source interprets the e-passport as being designed for much more than a simple document upgrade. It's viewed explicitly as a component of a global ID tracker. The argument is that countries like India adopting this are essentially complying with an impending worldwide standard, making every country's citizen management system compatible with every other's.
And here's where it gets really interesting, moving into the political and sort of organizational claims. The source points directly to major non-state actors. The World Economic Forum, the WEF, comes up a lot, and their alleged promotion of digital identities as a cornerstone of future governance. Does the source material give any specific examples, like WEF programs or white papers that link this e-passport tech to a broader digital ID concept? Or is it more of a philosophical critique?
It's both, really. The source references broad Webehoff statements about the need for digital IDs in a post-COVID world to manage global movement. But to connect that high-level promotion to a concrete framework, the source also links this entire digital push to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, specifically SDG 16.9.
And what's that one?
That goal is focused on the seemingly noble aim of providing a legal identity for all by the year 2030.
Right, and a goal like providing legal identity to the unbanked or stateless, that sounds incredibly positive. So why does the source material frame it so cynically? Why do they claim it's a mechanism for control?
Because the source argues the mechanism matters more than the stated goal. They contend that the only globally acceptable mechanism to achieve legal identity for all is mandatory biometric registration and digital IDs.
Like the e-passport chip.
Exactly, like the e-passport chip, which ensures that interoperability. The claim is that the humanitarian goal is being used as the moral justification to push through the underlying technological infrastructure of control. And this brings us back to the ultimate question the source material poses about all of this. Once your passport, your bank, and your health data all verge into one chip, who owns you?
And the answer they give
is unequivocal. The system and the centralized administrators, not the individual who's carrying the document.
That idea that the system owns the access rights to your identity, that's the core argument here. So let's shift to the bigger picture, the source paints. How do e-passports, CBDCs, and centralized data, how do they fit into this very contentious vision of owning nothing and being happy?
The source material defines this as a clear, recognizable pattern of control, one built on three interlocking technological pillars. E-passports are the identity pillar. Then you have the financial pillar, central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, and finally the mobility pillar, the concept of smart cities. These three together form a comprehensive grid.
And CBDCs are vital here.
Absolutely. Unlike crypto or even current digital banking, the sources describe CBDCs as potentially programmable money.
Programmable, what does that mean?
It means it could come with expiration dates or restrictions on what you can spend it on. So if your CBDC account is controlled by the same digital key as your e-passport identity, well, the financial system becomes this incredibly powerful lever for behavioral compliance.
So the overarching goal that the source material cites for linking these three systems is what they call total interoperability.
Exactly. This isn't just about sharing information between departments. It's about creating a single, seamless digital infrastructure where your identity, your money, and your physical movement are all managed and governed by the same centralized algorithmic architecture.
And the practical implication of that, that's where the source paints its most dramatic scenario. Can you give us a concrete example from the material? How does, say, losing a passport translate into a frozen bank account?
The source argues the key is the single point of failure, your unique biometric digital ID. If you commit an offense or if the state just disapproves of your activity, that digital identity gets flagged in the central ledger. Since the CBDC system uses that same ID as the key for your money, and the Smart City Grid uses it for access to transport.
Single click.
A single algorithmic decision to revoke or suspend your identity access instantly freezes all three domains at the same time. It's the digital equivalent of being locked out of your own life. You can't just use cash.
Because that might be phased out by CBDCs.
Right, or drive your car if automated smart city systems block unauthorized digital keys.
Which leads to the source's highly charged conclusion about the nature of this system. It's described as digital feudalism, a system where private ownership is replaced by access, and that access is a privilege that can be revoked.
Yes. And to tie this back to the positive narrative we talked about, the source addresses inclusive governance, which organizations like the UN's ID 2020 Alliance often talk about. The source counters this by cynically describing the intended outcome as governance by algorithmic leash.
An algorithmic leash.
A system built to ensure compliance through total technological dependence.
This analysis, drawn entirely from this highly skeptical source material, it's a challenging vision to absorb. So, if the sources see these systems as a fundamental threat to individual sovereignty, what does this all mean for the listener, for people facing the reality of these systems being deployed right now? The sources move from just analysis to outlining practical steps for resistance.
That's right. The sources argue there's a clear but closing window of opportunity for pushback before the systems become mandatory, irreversible. They detail 3 specific strategies people can adopt right now. The first one is straightforward. Demand offline alternatives for identity verification. The material argues that if you let technology become the only way to verify identity, you inherently centralize control. So demanding paper, face-to-face, non-digital options, that keeps the door open.
And the second strategy is very specific to where we started, the merging of records.
Precisely. The material strongly suggests that individuals reject the Aadhaar passport linking. It specifically notes that according to their research, this linking is often voluntary.
Even if that's not advertised.
Even if that fact isn't widely communicated during the application process. By keeping those systems separate, you deny the database that total interoperability at once.
And finally, a strategy for daily life, one that requires, conscious effort.
Yes. The third strategy is to actively localize and fragment your digital footprint. This means making daily choices to use cash, avoiding smart visas or high-tech city services, taking deliberate steps to make it harder for the central system to consolidate all your data banking, travel, health into that single, unified digital identity.
The goal is to make yourself harder to govern with a single digital switch.
That's the idea.
So wrapping this up, the primary argument of the source material, it views e-passports as way more than just a bureaucratic change.
No.
It sees the acceptance of this chip as a test of public acceptance for the much larger digital identity infrastructure.
And the source leaves us with a provocative final warning. The contention is that if people accept biometric IDs silently, just believing the promise of convenience, then the groundwork is laid for the digital prison bars to follow. It forecasts a scenario, by 2030, where you may literally own nothing and be forced to perpetually beg the algorithmic system for permission just to exist.
That is certainly a powerful argument, a dramatic vision of the future. We've covered a remarkable distance today, going from the simple promise of a secure e-passport all the way to the source material's deep-seated fear of total interoperability and algorithmic leashes. The sources make a compelling, albeit highly skeptical case that these are not isolated technologies, that they are foundational components of a synchronized global identity system.
The key takeaway, I think, is to reflect on that distinction between access and ownership, especially in the context of this rapidly evolving digital identity. When your right to move, to transact, to participate in society, when it all relies on a centralized digital key, you have to seriously ask what kind of power shift that represents.
Right.
Is the convenience of moving through an airport faster really worth the vulnerability of having your entire life governed by a single interconnected access point?
It definitely encourages all of us to look closely at the details of every technological change that seeks to link our identity, our finances, and our mobility into one system. Look around you, observe the push for centralization, and then consider, what do you truly own in the digital age, and what is merely access that can be revoked? That's something worth mulling over long after this deep dive concludes. Thank you for exploring these complex claims with us.